I feel simplicity can be a lost art in modern day game design, especially on the PC gaming side of things. There's this rush to put more and more complexity and mechanics into all genres, despite the fact that those mechanics may draw away the focus on the core gaming experience. Silver Dollar Games seemingly understood the KISS principle in their original One-Finger Death Punch game, and you knew that one of the highest rated games on Steam ever would probably have a sequel in due time. One-Finger Death Punch 2 launches on the PC today, April 15th, 2019, for the price of... Actually, I don't know what price it's going on sale for, and that's at least 2 days before the sale of the game. It looks like it hasn't been decided yet. That's a little bit strange, but this Twitch action game is a sequel to a game that was known for being a cheap, fanatical experience. Estimates I've seen have ranged from $6 to $12, with the most precise estimate seemingly coming at $8.99. I will update the description with the price once it's settled, but for the purposes of this review and my buyability scale, I'll use the price of $10. But before I begin this review, this key was obtained from evolve.pr for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? Although it's actually not the only thing you should be here for. Let's be honest from the get-go. You want to know about the gameplay. One-Finger Death Punch 2 doesn't exactly sway from the original vision. You have mostly two buttons at your disposal, which default is the left and right mouse button. Enemies will approach you from both sides, and once they get into range based on the color bar below you, you click the appropriate mouse button to attack them and kill them. If you do end up misclicking, your character will throw himself forward and pause for a second or two. If an enemy touches you in that time, you'll take damage. Survive until the end of the wave with life left, and you'll move on to the next stage in most cases. And that's it. That's the base of the gameplay in a nutshell. It's all about Twitch action here, and the simplicity of the inputs combined with the speed of the gameplay work well together. The game does a great job of varying the rhythm of the inputs being thrown at you from both directions, forcing you to adjust on the fly and actually really react to everything around you without being overly predictable. Impact from each attack is felt with the over-the-top animations, which I'll get to later on, but it ends up giving you the feedback you need quickly without interrupting your focus on the attack bars and the enemies that are coming up. This is retained even as the game adds complexity. Enemies may take multiple hits to take down, or may switch the side of the field depending on your attacks. You'll have archers and ninjas start to throw things from the side of the screen as well, and with certain enemies, you'll enter quicker sequences that emphasize one-on-one duels. Weapons will help to extend your fighting range, and it all leads to feeling like a B-movie kung fu star from the 80s. AKA, you're gonna have a lot of fun with this. But that's not all the game throws at you, as the game adds some variety in themed levels. In certain levels, you may not be allowed to go past certain area thresholds, or your character may be invisible, meaning that you have to rely on the actual location of an enemy more to focus your attacks, as your bars aren't visible to you at that moment. In the main mode, there's probably about 15 plus different variations of these levels. These secondary level types can be hit or miss in the at-moment enjoyment at times, but all of them are important to the overall level progression and what skills they specifically test, and what you can learn from each of them. Take one of my favorite level types here, the Deadly Target level, where you have to specifically kill certain targets with ranged weapons. This level specifically tests your ability to take out key targets, and to quickly predict how many enemies are coming with the weapons that you need, how to kill them at the right point, so that you have the ranged weapon to kill the targets with. Once you do that, you just gotta do it 30 more times in the level, and you're good. Now, you may think, okay, that's cool, but that's only for one level type that they are testing that skill for, right? Not at all. That skill comes in handy for taking out those boss and brawler characters that could cause you major problems. And if you use that skill during the regular mob levels, then you'll have an easier time and can probably get through the harder levels with more ease. That's the beauty behind these level designs. Each of them focus on particular skill sets that make you a better player, and you're gonna need all you can get in those final levels. While the game progression starts very slow, and you'll almost think the game is going way too easy on you, you'll soon realize that the game will start ramping up slowly, and then ramping up a lot in the final half of the main progression. Another holdover from the original game is the skill points that you can accumulate, that will automatically activate based on a number of kills gotten. The skills range from the ability to shoot multiple bullets from a retrieved sniper rifle, to the ability to completely eliminate a side of the screen in one hit, to starting a short minigame that can help regain needed health. The skills are impressive, and can really get you out of a pinch if it just so happens to activate at the right time. But it can also feel like the game is sort of doing your job for you. The thing is though, you can take these skill points and deactivate them at any time if you feel like they are really hurting the challenge of the game. Or you could just speed up the game using the plus key during a level, and give you more of a challenge. I do like the skills because it did feel like if I went out of my way to get the skill points, I was rewarded in progression in the later levels where, quite frankly, you did need a little bit of help at times. Challenge is at the core of One Finger Death Punch 2, but unlike other games that have difficulty questions that have become the discussion of accessibility versus intent of the design versus whatever everyone is yelling about in games nowadays, the game allows you to get past certain key sections with revenge tokens, which you have to earn by the way, if you so desire, or to chase score on leaderboards for the ultimate rush. You can set your goals difficulty-wise thanks to the aforementioned speed and skill enhancers, while not keeping anyone else out of the enjoyment who may have trouble with some Twitch-like gameplay. Playing in alternative modes like survival mode kept the rush going, and what's key here is replayability. There's nothing here that's going to stop you from coming back in 1 week, 1 month, or even 1 year's time. The core gameplay to me is similar to the addiction of Tetris. Every now and again you'll want to play, but it'll be like riding a bike for the first time in a long, long while. There's also a co-op mode which unfortunately is local and therefore I didn't get the chance to try, but it's nice to see that it was added. There's also some overlap with some other silver dollar games, like No Luca No, which, yes, it did bring a smile to my face. What the gameplay boils down to is more of what made One Finger Death Punch a cult hit. And if you're expecting anything more Evolve than that on the gameplay side of things, you'll probably be disappointed to an extent. There's new sub-levels and modes and all, but to be honest, the core gameplay hasn't changed here, and frankly, shouldn't have. And I really have to thank the devs for that. I've seen too many indie devs thinking that they've got to blow the first game out of the water in terms of their sequel, and in the process, shoot themselves repeatedly in the foot. Silver Dollar Games, rest assured, you did not. And that's fantastic to see. Now, the gameplay did get upgraded a bit in certain areas. The bigger upgrade, however, happened in the game's presentation. Let me not mince words here. While the flash game-like charm of the original game didn't necessarily drag the game down, the new presentation is fantastic. I mean, just take a look at the first game's presentation here, and now take a look at this one. That in itself should speak volumes of the improvements here. The animation of moving from enemy to enemy in a waltz of violence is exactly what this game needed. fast-paced action that's over the top, but is visually stunning in all the right ways. It should be noted that if you slow down the action to a frame-by-frame breakdown, you will see some weird behavior animation-wise, like a flipping enemy all of a sudden being on the ground and being attacked. But that's not the point of this animation. It's supposed to be fast and fanatic rather than 100% accurate, and it gets the expression of a spectacle brawler over rather nicely, with bodies flying all over the place and blood spurting out of necks and limbs left and right. But unlike the first game, there's a lot more detail and oomph put into parts of the presentation here. Backgrounds have a lot more detail, depicting ancient Mayan ruins and the legend of the hidden temple, or downtown Chinese cities with temples and lanterns aplenty. It helps to give the game a bit of depth from a pseudo-story perspective of sorts, that you were just walking around looking for an ancient Chinese kung fu master, only to be completely surrounded, like a scene out of Kung Fu Hustle. To that extent though, some of the background work and some of the artwork put into the game, there's a real mishmash of styles at times. While I don't necessarily dislike them, it can be a little bit surprising while something of a completely different art style comes up while in the middle of fighting. It almost takes you off guard per se. The underrated start of this presentation, however, is the color work, specifically regarding the brightness and the hues that are used here. Note that all the colors that you need to see right away, the ones that you have to react to sooner, those are more brightly colored in most cases, or have designs that use color differences well against itself. Like the blue arrows here. Note how, yes, they aren't as bright as the actual indicators on the enemies themselves, but they still draw your eye because of the checkered nature of the shades. But a spectacle fighter also needs more than eye-catching visuals to do the job here. It also needs great sound design to make you feel the impact of your hits. One Finger Death Punch 2 does not disappoint in this area, as the crushing of bones when hitting the enemy, or the firing of a rifle through a series of villains, is so satisfying that it makes you question whether or not you truly love violence as a whole. The interruptions of the music falling out for when an event happens that takes out a whole screen of enemies emphasizes the sound design here. You can hear a train barrel into an enemy as your fist hits them, well, like a train. It's over the top, but here's the thing. It's over the top, but removes any unnecessary sounds. Sure, you have grunts that, get hit and they scream a tiny bit, but the bigger ones, you'll hear that sort of Wilhelm scream go off in the background. When you get to an enemy and rip out their heart, you will hear it, but otherwise, they're background noise to help with the action, but not draw attention to it. It's about the moments with the sound design, and frankly, it's pretty fantastic. I should also mention the announcer briefly here, as his deep voice and narration really helps drive home the kung fu-like mentality, like a master overlooking his student. He only shows up briefly at times, but when he does, it brings a calm before the storm in question, or makes you gain focus if it's in the middle of a fight. Frankly, for an indie title of this size, the sound design can't be beat. Listen to what I'm talking about.
Last hit. Attack right to remove the red bar. Don't let the bar hit the ground. Attack left to remove the blue bar. Attack only once per bar. You have this entire zone to match the bars. Always match from the bottom up.
The one hiccup in the presentation is the music in my eyes, but it's not that the music is necessarily bad. I mean, all the tracks seem to have high beats per minute to keep the action tones of the game intact. But the game is random about what it plays. Just Alt-Tab and go back into the game and you'll see that. You then end up getting more cyberpunk techno music in an ancient stage. And frankly, I just found myself turning down the music to focus on the sound design and the announcer. It's not bad music, but I wouldn't be putting it on my phone to listen to later. In fact, it's like a B-movie soundtrack. Just listen to what I'm talking about. Overall, a great presentation to go with the gameplay, and this is why you're going to get the upgrade in terms of the sequel. Everything looks crisp, everything looks cleaner, and well, it just looks rad to kick somebody's head off. As for the technical elements of the game has 5 base resolutions, starting from 768 by 432 and going up to 1080p resolution, with full screen or windowed modes both available. There's 3 graphics quality options if you're really trying to get more performance out of the game, but let's be clear here. Note the FPS in the corner of the footage here with my specs. If you're really concerned about frames per second in a game that looked like a Flash game in its first iteration, rest assured you're good here. 400 plus FPS? Yeah, we're probably going to be okay. To be honest, I'm actually surprised here. There's a huge jump from the original game in terms of graphical fidelity and presentation, and yet, there were no frame drops of any sort here, no inconsistency, no anything like that. It was rock solid. Which is weird because they warned in the lead up to the game that the game was in a sort of early access state. They didn't call it early access, but they wanted people to report any bugs. And I experienced none. None. I looked up and down and even tried to cause them myself. Remember, I'm a software engineer. I do know where to stress things. I know where to cause trouble. And the game ran perfectly fine for me. As for options, I did mention the graphics options before, but you also have sound and music sliders along with a master audio slider. You could choose to play the sounds in the background here, which I think is supposed to put less emphasis on them, but disabling this option, I really couldn't tell what it did. If you want to turn off the announcer, you could do so here too, but why would you want to do that? Now, the one disappointment I will bring up here is that there are no bindable keys, although they do have an option for alternative control schemes here. Then again, I do feel like the mouse is the perfect controller for this type of game anyway, but I do wish you could change it up. You can also customize your character a tiny bit, but I do like that they kept these options at a minimum. Sure, you could have made your character look really different with ridiculous hats or some color schemes, but it would have started to dig into the gameplay in my opinion because of the simplicity and the color scheme against the background. Finally, you have a lot of small options to fine-tune this experience. And for those who have motion sickness problems or problems with specific effects, you are going to love this menu because, well, you can fine-tune as you want. Overall, a fantastic set of options are here, and the performance is great. There is one blemish with the controls, but even then, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Great job by the devs here. Finally, let's talk about the game's story. There is no story. The Steam store page actually says as much. But actually, that's a bit false. There's actually a small story told at the end of the game regarding the game's development itself, and well, I won't spoil it, but let's just say it's hard to say that it didn't tug on my heartstrings. Honestly, it was much better of a story than the Quiet Man story was. Yes, I'm still bitter about that game. But frankly, the game didn't need a story, because the focus was solely on gameplay here, and it's better for it. In the end, One Finger Death Punch 2 is a lot more of what you'd want following the first game. And what's fascinating is how little I wanted to stop playing it. The game does recommend to do it in short bursts, which I do agree with, but the thing is, I still was able to get reasonable enjoyment even in 3-hour play sessions, 4-hour play sessions. The game's one more run quality from the original is back, despite some general repetition in the gameplay style, but the over-the-top nature of the presentation, along with satisfying sound design, leads to about 8 to 12 hours of gameplay in the main mode, along with more from the side modes, and you've got what will surely be another highly rated Steam game. One Finger Death Punch 2 comes in at an 88 out of 100, making the game a solid buy unless you're hurting for cash. But that doesn't include my enhancer system, which takes the most subjective elements from games and puts them into scores to add or subtract to the more objective main score to try to fit to you. So, if you fall into one of the following categories, add or subtract that score to the main score, and only if you strongly fall into that category. If the first digit of your score changes, refer to this chart to find out where the game lies with you on the buyability range. The next big review on this channel will be Zanki Zero Last Beginning, but that may take a bit because it's a dungeon crawler and I do have a bunch of other things going on in real life right now. You may get a 5-minute review of a past game in the meanwhile, along with some streams of course. I do have an interview tomorrow with a game studio software engineering wise, so wish me luck if you really want to. Anyway, leave your feedback in the comments section below, and maybe share the video with a friend that you think may like the game. That's it for now, and as always, keep on gaming.